Hello friends, welcome to UPSC Logics, and this is part 6 of the revision series we are conducting on Constitution of India. So this particular video has been made specially keeping the UPSC exam in mind, and in this chapter we shall be covering directive principles of state policy. So this particular video has been done in a one-liner format, and this is a quick revision series of most relevant questions. So guys, without wasting any time, let's begin. The framers of our constitution borrowed the concept of directive principles of state policy from the constitution of, or the idea of directive principles of state policy is borrowed from the constitution of Ireland. Directive principles are contained in, or welfare provisions under Indian constitution are guaranteed under Part 4. Who described the directive principles of state policy as the novel feature of Indian Constitution? It was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The directive principles of state policy aim at providing a social and economic base for a genuine democracy in the country. Directive principles of state policy are positive instructions to government to work for the attainment of set objectives. Directive principles of state policy are in the nature of guidelines to state. The Constitution assures economic justice to the Indian citizens through directive principles of state policy. The DPSP are included in our Constitution from Articles 36 to 51 and are divided into social, Gandhian, and liberal directive principles. All of the following articles deal with directive principles of state policy except Article 50 that deals in separation of judiciary from the executive. Directive principles and fundamental rights were called Conscience of the Constitution by Granville Austin. So these are some of the features of the directive principles of state policy. They are non-justifiable in nature. They can be amended by the parliament, supported by more than 50% of the states. Then the planning in India derives its objectives from directive principles of state policy. The aim of DPSP is to establish a welfare state in the country. And the enforcement of directive principles of state policy depends on resources available with the government. Then these have been classified into socialist, Gandhian, and liberal. And this particular act was not passed to implement directive principles of state policy. This was the Arms Act because it went into contradiction with directive principles of state policy. And the directive principles of state policy have been borrowed as instruments of instruction from Government of India Act 1935. Under which article has the state been directed to secure for all citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India? This is Article 44 and belongs to liberal directive principles. Then common uniform civil code means common civil law applicable to all. Uniform civil code means a codified law applicable to all persons of India irrespective of their religion. Who recommended that rights of Indian citizens should be divided into justifiable and non-justifiable? It was B.N. Rao, and he was the constitutional advisor to the Constituent Assembly. Article 51 mandates India's foreign policy to promote international peace and security, encourage settlement of international disputes by arbitration, and maintain just and good relations between nations. The phrase economic justice is found in preamble and fundamental rights. The right to adequate means of livelihood is to be provided by the state under Article 39. Article 45 mandates the state to provide for early childhood care and education for all children until they complete the age of 6 years. It is the obligation of the state to protect every monument or place or object of artistic or historic interest and of national importance under Article 49. The DPSP seeks to make the Constitution an instrument of social change. What does the directive principles help the courts with? To exercise power of judicial review and see the constitutional validity of law. Which part of the Constitution do the DPSP amplify? It is the preamble of the Constitution. Article 45 states to provide childhood care and education for all children up to the age of 6 years. Before 2002, Article 45 made a provision for free and compulsory education for all children up to the age of 14 years. This particular directive principle was converted into a fundamental right under Article 21A by the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002. The state imposing tax on capital and wealth according to taxation law is protected under Article 39. According to the interpretation of Supreme Court, the word material resources means both movable and immovable property. Distribution of material resources of the community as to subserve the common good, guaranteed under Article 39b, aim at the principle of a secular state. Who said in the Constituent Assembly that the directive principles are like a check on a bank payable at the convenience of the bank? It was K.T. Shah. Which one of the following wanted the directive principles to be the basis of all future legislations? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Which amendment of the Constitution accorded precedence to all the directive principles of state policy over fundamental rights? It was the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. Which article guides the state to promote the welfare of the state? Article 38. Which article provides for the separation of judiciary from the executive? Article 50. Which article recognizes international law under the Constitution? It is Article 51. In which case did the Supreme Court strike down the provisions of the Constitution that accorded primacy to directive principles of state policy over fundamental rights? That was the Minerva Mill case, 1980. Which part of Constitution aims at establishing a welfare state in the country? Simple, directive principles of state policy. Under DPSP, the state is expected to provide free and compulsory education to all children up to the age of 14 years. And this was Article 45. Just and humane conditions of work and maximum living wages for workers is provided respectively under the Articles 42 and 43. The state is obligated to protect and improve the environment and safeguarding of forest and wildlife of the country under Article 48A. Protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forest and wildlife under Article 48A is inserted in the Constitution by 42nd Amendment Act, and the 42nd Amendment Act added 3 new directives, and they were participation of workers in the management of industry, Article 43A, protection of environment, Article 48A, and free legal aid to the poor, that is Article 39A. Consider the following statements regarding the directive principles of state policy. The directive principles of state policy aim at realizing the ideals of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution, and the directive principles of state policy have to be kept in mind by the government while formulating policies and framing laws. Which one of the following directive principles of state policy is based on Gandhian ideology? Number 1 is Organization of Village Panchayats, Article 40. Then prohibition of use of intoxicating drinks except for medicinal purposes, Article 47. and to work for the development of weaker or backward sections of the society, which is Article 46. Which amendment of the Constitution sought to enhance the importance of directive principles of state policy, and it provided that no law passed to give effect to directive principles of state policy contained in Article 39B and C shall be deemed to be void, which means that no law that was passed to give effect to directive principles of state policy if it was in contradiction with Articles 14 and 19 and was contained in Article 39B and C would be void on grounds that it was in violation with fundamental rights Article 14 and 19, and this was done by the Constitutional Amendment Act number 25. Which of the following factors have been responsible for the slow implementation of directive principles? First is vastness of the country. Second is lack of resources with the government, and the third is lack of political will. Which characteristics of directive principles provided in the Indian Constitution are incorrect? No law can be passed by legislature which is not in conformity with these principles. So this particular characteristic is incorrect. Which one of the following directive principles of state policy reflects socialist ideology? To ensure a decent standard of living and leisure for all workers, to provide adequate means of livelihood to all, and to prevent concentration of wealth and means of production, and to ensure equitable distribution of wealth and material resources. The directive principles of state policy to be followed by the state for securing economic justice does not include to secure a uniform civil code, and this is Article 44. Which one of the following has been wrongly listed as directive principles of state policy based on liberal principles? This is Article 50, and it mentions about the separation of judiciary from the executive. The directive principles of state policy cannot be enforced by any court. Then taking stringent measures to eliminate corruption. This is also not a directive principle. Then secure, just and efficient judiciary. This is also not a directive principle. Free legal aid. Article 39A is inserted under Indian Constitution by way of the 42nd Amendment Act 1976. Village panchayats, Article 40, are the best examples for India's democratic form of government, and this is also the first one of the Gandhian principles. The Indian Constitution is silent as to which of the following, so that is adult education. Then which one of the following reasons has been wrongly listed for the slow implementation of DPSP, that is opposition from the society? In the event of non-enforcement of DPSP by the government, a citizen of India can move. So this is a non-justifiable right, so the citizen can do nothing. Provisions for a welfare state in India are found again in DPSP. In Gandhian socialism, state is required. The following statement in regards to DPSP is correct, and that is the court can compel the state to implement some of the important directives. So the court has got this power. Which one of the following DPSP is a socialistic principle? Prevention of concentration of wealth and the means of production, protection and of health of workers, and equal pay for equal work to all, that is Article 39. The purpose of the inclusion of directive principles in the Indian Constitution is to establish a social and economic democracy. Slow implementation of directive principles is due to lack of political will. The framers of the Constitution made the directive principles non-justifiable because the country did not possess sufficient financial resources to implement them. The presence of vast and diverseness in the country would stand in the way of implementation. Number 3. The newly born independent India, with its many preoccupations, would be crushed under the burden unless it was free to decide the time, order, and mode to implement these principles. Who has called the directive principles as no better than the New Year's resolution to be broken on 2nd of January? So that has been said by Nasruddin. In which case did Supreme Court rule that in case of conflict between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, the fundamental rights would prevail? That was Champakam Duraijan case 1951. In which case did the Supreme Court rule that the state could not amend the fundamental rights to accommodate the directive principles of state policy since they were sacrosanct in nature? And this was done in the Golaknath case 1967. So let us have a look at all the articles and the directive principles of state policy associated with them. And this I have taken from the book called Lakshmikant. So Article 36 is definition of the state, and it has the same meaning as state defined in Part 3 of the Constitution. Then Article 37 says the principles are fundamental in governance and it is the duty of the state to implement them. Article 38 says state to secure a social order for the promotion of welfare of people. Then Article 39 is certain principles are to be followed by the state. Article 39A is equal justice and free legal aid. This was added by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. Article 40 is organization of village panchayats. This is a Gandhian principle. Article 41 is right to work, to education and to public assistance in certain cases. Article 42 is provision for just and humane condition of work and maternity leave. Then Article 43 is living wage, etc. for workers. Article 43A is participation of workers in management of industries. 43B again is a Gandhian principles and it says promotion of cooperative society. Article 44 is uniform civil code. Then Article 45 is provision of early childhood care and education to children to ages below 6 years, and this was changed by the 86 Constitutional Amendment Act in year 2002, when this particular directive principle, which stated free and compulsory education to children up to the age of 14 years, and it was made into a fundamental right under Article 21A, making it compulsory for children between 6 to 14 years. So Article 46, promotion of educational and economic interest of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and other weaker sections. Then Article 47 is duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living and to improve public health. Article 48 says organization of animal husbandry, and this also is included in the liberal principles as well as the Gandhian principles. Then Article 48A is protection to and improvement of environment and safeguarding forest and wildlife, again added through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Article 49 says protection of monuments and places and objects of national importance. Article 50 says separation of judiciary from the executive, which is not supposed to be a directive principle. Then Article 51 says promotion of international peace and security. So this brings us to the end of part 6 of this series, and I hope you have enjoyed it. If you are watching it for the first time, do like and subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon for notification of new videos. Thank you so much for watching, and Jai Hind.